There was a time when everybody was saying you should learn to code. You would make a ton of money and you would be secure for employment for the rest of your life. It was the literal future of work. But today, you can't open a feed without hearing about layoffs in tech.
And we have breaking news at 17 past the hour. Microsoft says it is laying off at least 10,000 employees.
80% of Twitter either left or quit or was pushed out.
Last night, CEO Sundar Pichai told his workforce to expect more cuts.
In January 2025, the US tech sector cut 15,000 jobs, and that number increased to 18,000 in February. And that raises a couple of questions. Why is that happening? Will it continue? Should you be looking to get into tech still, or is it a bad choice career-wise? I'm Mike. I've got 25 years of experience from pharma, tech, and consulting. I've held C-suite roles in human resources in international companies. I have degrees in business, human resources, and psychology. On this channel, I cover business and careers. I analyze and pick apart why companies do the things they do, and I provide advice on careers and navigating the corporate world. Today, it's about those tech layoffs and what it means for you. Let's get stuck in. In February of 2025, Crunchbase reported that the US tech sector had laid off 95,000 people in 2024. TrueUp reported a number of close to 250,000 layoffs within tech. The media is filled with stories of companies like Intel, Meta, Google, PayPal, Microsoft, Twitter laying off relatively large numbers of employees. Now, these numbers aren't just tech workers. Google notably recently cut back in their HR department. In general, though, the cutbacks in support functions are typically also a reflection of previous cutbacks somewhere else in the business. If you've got less tech staff, then you need less HR staff to support them. If you have less people working in tech, you also need fewer people cleaning offices and filling up coffee machines. There's no doubt that tech layoffs are a real thing, and since 2022, the magnitude of layoffs have definitely been amplified. Far more people are being laid off. Compared to the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s and the 2008 recession, this is up there in terms of sheer numbers of layoffs. But it's not all bad, though. Computer World has an excellent write-up of the health of employment in the tech sector. Of the most notable points, it's clear that unemployment for tech workers in the US is at least lower than the overall national unemployment rate. The number of tech jobs have been steadily growing at a couple of percentage points per year for decades. Active job listings are a little bit down from 2 years ago, but new postings are, if not holding steady, then only a little bit lower by a few percentage points compared to some years back. Overall, things don't sound too bad, but the messaging from companies like Meta, Intel, and Google still seems ominous.
Is AI.
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 AI is coming, and big tech at least is talking about becoming more efficient, and usually what happens is that other tech companies have a tendency to follow suit. So the big question is, are those big tech layoffs a harbinger of greater cuts across the sector? And to understand that, we need to look at the stated reasons. We'll get to the general explanations for the layoffs, but I do think it's very important to recognize the reasons that are specific to different companies.
Here's how a mistake the company made decades ago has snowballed into an overwhelming obstacle that Lip Bhutan will have to face.
Intel is not just laying off because tech has overhired. Intel, as an example, have been mismanaged and are, as an individual company, in a pretty bad state. Salesforce, just as an example, have also overextended themselves. A lot of companies going through these layoffs have important reasons that are specific to them. It's important to be mindful of that and not conclude that every single layoff has a systemic justification for an entire sector. Overhiring has been thrown around by CEOs and other analysts as a reason.
Unlike a startup, almost all of these companies also engage in overhiring.
Tech, especially in the US, apparently hoarded tech resources during COVID, essentially trying to secure the critical staff to support expansions of their businesses into new areas and new investments, while also expanding on features and technologies within their existing offerings. Data completely supports this. During COVID and slightly into post-COVID, there was massive demand for tech resources across the board. Now, this is the time where I introduce a truism that pretty much all HR executives know. There's no in-between when it comes to hiring. A company is either on or off. This is especially true the larger the company gets. In an organization of 60,000 people, the corporate message of "we're growing, but we need to exercise restraint when hiring" does not work. This always gets translated by individual managers into "my team is being restrained by only hiring 15% more staff." Hiring freezes in large companies where they have exception processes rarely work particularly well either. So the bigger the company is, when the tap is open, it's completely open. And when the tap is closed, it's completely closed. A lot of these companies did overhire, and now they have far too many people compared to what they actually need done. Now, I don't have too many people yet. I'm still looking to expand this little community. So if you're enjoying my content, then click on the subscribe button below. It's a good way for me to know whether or not the content I'm making is worthy of your time. And you get a notification when I upload a new video. So click subscribe if you feel it's worth it. Thanks.
But is AI a buzzword?
Is AI.
AI.
Yes. The answer is yes. It's a buzzword.
I am calling BS on AI. Not in the long term, but right now, I'm not buying that there are massive efficiencies across the board for implementing AI within tech roles. If you look at the statistics on the precursors to AI, so machine learning adoption, it's not that high. Across the world, machine learning is adopted in less than 50% of surveyed businesses, and most of those businesses have only adopted it in some of their departments. By adoption, it really means in use in at least one department in a company. Machine learning automation is far more common in customer service and customer experience and finance, where administrative processes have been automated. But it's far from this all-encompassing implementation of tools and services that have made roles massively redundant. For now, my opinion is it's largely the same with AI. Speak to any dev worth their salt. They'll speak highly of the efficiencies they've personally gained from AI, to correct code, replicate code, test code, generate snippets of code. But we're not there where some individual can just go to AI and say, make me a fully functional Twitter competitor system. Code it all, make all the integrations, test it, and put it into production. AI is having an effect on certain types of roles, especially entry and more menial coding roles, but it hasn't replaced devs completely. Zuckerberg says otherwise, but the CEO of Google isn't on board yet. For now, my money is with the Google guy and the people who are saying, still a bit of a pipe dream. It's more realistic than blockchain, but we never know. I also think that when people think of AI, they compare it to how the horse-drawn cart was replaced in a few years by the car. But I think the analogy is wrong. This is more of a case how the PC replaced the typewriter. You still need someone to type, but something just got massively more efficient. And that does, of course, lead to needing less people, but not to everybody being redundant.
These companies like to claim that nothing has changed in terms of their company culture relative to when they began. This means that they're still hyper-focused on growth.
Tech executives have also pointed to the fact that their industry is maturing. With maturity comes efficiency, scale gains, and ultimately less demand for staff. Tech has been an interesting sector where for a very long time, the scalable value of the employee was off the charts. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's take another example. A school teacher is not, as an individual, particularly scalable. A school teacher is likely best with a certain number of students. And if you go above, 25 or 30 students, the likelihood is that the quality of their teaching rapidly declines. The same goes for a psychologist. They have a natural limit to how many clients they can see in a day, and they cannot scale in volume beyond that. But that's not the case in a lot of software-based tech. They're the old stories of how single individuals designed PC games that ended up selling in the millions. There's the Tetris guy. Now, it's not likely as feasible anymore, but there's a truth to the fact that Microsoft had a potential market of billions of instances of Windows. And if you divide the number of users of Windows with the number of employees at Microsoft, the ratio is insane. The same goes for Facebook, Google, Meta, Twitter. The potential scale of the customer base for a relatively small number of employees was huge. And that meant this has been an industry that was okay with hiring a couple of extra people because the marginal cost relative to the potential gain was insane. But those scale benefits are declining because the markets are maturing. Growth in Facebook users is tapering off or even dropping. The market for Microsoft products is maybe not saturated, but we're beyond hypergrowth, and adding extra staff won't necessarily lead to massive revenue gains. So broadly speaking, tech is big and mature. Massive growth for the big players is less feasible. If they want to grow their profit margins now, they have to, for the first time, look at how many people they have employed. Strictly speaking, maintaining Instagram or something is much less resource intensive than inventing and scaling Instagram. One of the key takeaways, though, is that this is especially the case for large tech players. New ideas still pop up and new products need scaling, but Netflix and Amazon and Facebook just aren't in the hyper-growth and scaling game anymore. So it's not them that will lead the charge in terms of creating a lot of new tech jobs. Outsourcing is to some extent also a function of maturity. You get big, and in an effort to keep margins up in lower growth scenarios, you start to look at ways to optimize your cost base. And you do that by, among other things, looking for cheaper buildings and cheaper people in other countries. IBM, Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, they all have huge practices in places like India and the Philippines and a whole lot of other countries. This trend is also confirmed to be accelerating in tech. As more tech work becomes repetitive and less innovation-centric, more and more jobs are moving to other locations like India. Over the time, the innovation also moves, but it's the bread and butter that goes first, and it's the salary arbitrage essentially, and that's happening more and more in tech. The companies themselves don't use monopolization as a reason, but I'm bringing it up anyway because there are some economists raising it as a topic. Google, Microsoft, all the rest are so big now that they fundamentally aren't as innovative as they once were. This is a well-documented, typical and predictable consequence of two things: size and market dominance. Big companies are generally not particularly innovative. They become bureaucratic and risk-averse. Coupled with market dominance, they become protectionist, and either they seek to kill innovation around them if it competes with them, or to acquire it if it makes sense. Amazon's super well known for killing or insourcing good ideas. So is Google. A lot of smaller companies also being acquired earlier, partly because of owners wanting to cash out sooner, but also because big players are more aggressive in wanting to gain control over new innovative technologies and markets. This will create a risk of driving some level of innovative stagnation, which ultimately could lead to lower levels of hiring. You're even seeing this in how US companies are much more aggressively making use of legal instruments like non-competes to hinder employees' mobility within tech. This is also driving less innovation and job growth. So we've got two questions. Will this continue? And is it a bad idea to get into tech? The answer to the first question is a clear and unequivocal yes. Big tech, in particular, is going to continue laying people off. The industry as a whole is in a much more mature state. Investment is not disappearing, though. Deloitte estimates in their most recent report that global IT spending is expected to increase by 9.3% year on year, and AI investment is expected to increase by 29% annually until 2029. Those are big numbers, and it's important not to conflate maturity with stagnation, and definitely not decline. Mature industries can still experience strong growth. It's not as easy as just looking at an individual company's numbers. As one example, Microsoft, their growth in revenues is not just a reflection of growth in Windows 11 subscriptions. It's also a reflection of the transition from Windows and Office to cloud and infrastructure businesses. But I do think it holds true with maturity that we will generally see a less aggressive sourcing of talent in favor of scale benefits. But the industry and the sector is still growing, and the demand for tech resources, also outside of tech, is still there. Tech workers are not at the stage of US auto workers in, the 70s or 80s or 90s. It is, though, the case now that the supply of tech workers versus the demand seems to be shifting in favor of the employers. Most universities and colleges have been pumping out tech workers for decades now, and a maturing industry is likely to take what it can get. A maturing industry will tend to favor offshoring and outsourcing. A maturing industry will also push for a different balance between inexperienced hires, mid-level hires, and highly specialized staff. To me, it essentially means one thing. Tech is still a relevant career path, but broadly speaking, tech is not quite as hot a career path as it was anymore. Tech skills, in the broadest sense of the word, are more of a commodity, which means on average, the companies are less dependent on any one individual. New technologies are going to open up new avenues. AI will make some roles more efficient, but it will also open the door to other roles. But yes, it's not the end of the world, but tech isn't what it has been. It's more and more just a job like so many others. There are less and less hot skills, and that does mean that despite overall growth, we're not looking into a period where everybody is going to get chased down by recruiters as aggressively as they have been. Which leads me to my question. What's your experience with hiring and job seeking in tech where you live? Is it easier or harder? What are the hot skills? What's your sense out there? Share in the comments, and once you've clicked the like and subscribe button, get back to work. See you in 2 weeks when we talk about finding the best paid jobs out there. Cheers.